There are dozens of terms printed on egg cartons to make you feel like you're making choices that are either healthy, humane, or a good value. But how do you know if you're really getting any of those things? Let's examine all of these egg cartons and break down the terms that you need to know in order to make the best decision for you. The most commonly confused terms are directly related to the living conditions and outdoor access available to the hens laying your eggs. And these terms all fall on a spectrum. One of the really common terms you'll see on egg cartons is cage-free. Most eggs come from hens that live in a cage. Cage-free is taking hens out of the cage, giving them free space. But this doesn't necessarily mean that they have any access to the outdoors. What this could mean is that these cage-free eggs come from hens that are living in just a giant warehouse together. Keeping a lot of hens confined, even outside of cages, could mean that the chickens don't necessarily have enough personal space, and they might fight and they might peck at each other. There are 9 different states here in the United States that either currently require or will soon require that all eggs sold in the state be cage-free. The next step in this progression are free-range eggs. This generally means that chickens are raised in a warehouse, but they do have access to the outdoors for at least a significant portion of the day. That could be just an open door in the warehouse where they live. The actual number of hens that take advantage of the outdoor space is debatable. When chickens have access to outdoor space, it generally means that their diet ends up being slightly more diversified. Chickens have access to insects to eat, or other types of things that might end up in their diet, which could affect the egg color or flavor. These fluctuations generally aren't gigantic, but it can alter the nutrient profile of eggs. The living conditions that provide the most space are pasture-raised. Pasture-raised hens spend a substantial portion of the day outdoors in the grass doing chicken things. Different certifying agencies or organizations have different requirements for how much space each chicken needs to have. It is usually more than 100 square feet per hen, which is a lot of space. Eggs laid by pasture-raised hens generally have different variations in color and flavor because chickens have access to eat insects off the grass or spend more time in the sun. Generally, pasture-raised have very dark orange, almost red yolks, which some people view as a sign of quality. Considering the number of people that are required to move the hens from the indoors to the outdoors and the amount of just space required for these hens, all of these factors drive up the price because there's a lot of hands-on work that requires a lot of people. A very common term that you'll see across the grocery store right now is organic. That means that the USDA has certified that these chickens had access to outdoor space and were fed an organic diet. This means that there were no unorganic, inorganic pesticides or fertilizers used to produce the feed that was fed to these hens. There is some internal reporting that sometimes these rules aren't enforced as often or as strictly as they should be, and that could have an impact on the quality of the eggs. At the end of the day, it's a personal choice. Differences in vitamins and nutrients are going to be relatively minor, but if you personally feel very passionate about growing food in the best conditions possible, organic foods might be of interest to you. In addition to a lot of the terms that we see on these egg cartons, we also do see on a few of them certified humane. This is a certification that farmers get from an organization called Humane Farm Animal Care. This is a third party that certifies that the farmers, the growers, are meeting at least certain specifications to be considered a humane product. There are other third-party organizations that also do different types of certification, but the requirements don't always match up. And this can be a little bit confusing. At least with this term, certified humane, they did have to verify that they're meeting certain standards in order to be considered a humane farm operation. Most of these certifications are something that growers do pay for, and they can be very expensive, which is why certified humane eggs, pasture-raised eggs, free-range eggs tend to be more expensive than other eggs that you find at the grocery store. In many places across the United States, there won't be any sort of indication of how the chicken was raised on the package. You can assume that if it doesn't specify that eggs were at least cage-free, that the chickens were raised in cages, sometimes as small as an 8 by 11 piece of paper. This is viewed by many as an inhumane practice for raising chickens. Being confined with that many other hens does also mean that diseases can be transferred from one chicken to another really quickly. While there are questions about how humane it is to raise chickens in this way, it's really important, especially for lower income households, to have access to really nutrient-rich foods like eggs. In an ideal world, we could find pasture-raised eggs for the same price as these cage-raised eggs. That's just not the world that we live in. While many of the claims that you see have to do with how the chicken was raised, other terms that you see on the front of packages have to do with what the chickens were fed. Another common thing that you see on egg cartons is no antibiotics added or no hormones added. This can be potentially a little bit misleading. Egg-laying hens are, in the overwhelming majority of cases, not allowed to be treated with antibiotics or hormones. That only pertains to egg-laying hens. The chicken that you buy at the grocery store may have been treated with hormones or antibiotics to help the chicken grow and generally leads to a meatier chicken. There's a lot of conversation around antibiotic-resistant microbes in the food supply. Things like MRSA do pose a major health risk. That is one major motivation for removing all antibiotics from the food production system. If you see the word natural on a carton of eggs, just know that that term is essentially meaningless. In this case, generally means that the hens laying the eggs weren't treated with antibiotics. In fact, in most cases in terms of food, unless it's before the word flavor or color, the word natural is not regulated very much in the food industry. So the word natural, it should actually, in a lot of cases, be a red flag. Because you can assume that none of the eggs that you see at the grocery store have been laid by hens treated with antibiotics or hormones. It's essentially just a marketing claim. One of the very common terms that you see on egg packages is vegetarian-fed hens. Chickens are naturally omnivorous, so they don't actually need to be fed a vegetarian diet. But to some consumers, it's important to know that there weren't any animal byproducts added into the chicken feed. As I stated earlier, pasture-raised hens who are spending a lot of time outdoors are eating insects and things that they come across as they're running around. Just like it's important for us as people to diversify our diet, eating a more diverse diet can lead to healthier hens, and a lot of those healthier hens lay better quality eggs. At the end of the day, when I see vegetarian fed on a carton of eggs, it's not gonna be a deal breaker on if I purchase those eggs or not. A hen's diet can affect some aspects of the nutrition of the egg that is produced from that hen. One of those things is omega-3 fatty acids. Omega-3 fatty acids are viewed as some of the healthy fats in our diet. These polyunsaturated fatty acids can lower the risk of cardiovascular disease and also of certain types of cancer. Omega-3 fatty acids wind up in these eggs because the hens that lay these eggs were fed generally a diet high in flaxseed. Flaxseed is a natural source of omega-3 fatty acids, and some of those do end up getting transferred into the egg. 225 milligrams is substantially less than what you'd get from eating an oily fish like a salmon. But if you're not eating a lot of fish, this could be a good way to supplement some omega-3s into your diet. In the United States, grading your eggs is voluntary. The general consumer is generally not going to be able to tell much of a difference between an A, AA, or even a B grade egg. Grade B eggs are generally only used in baking. The different things that affect egg grading will be the size and essentially perkiness of the yolk, but then also the thickness of the egg white. Other factors that are considered when grading eggs are if there are any blemishes on the shell. Those are mostly just aesthetic things, generally not an indicator of an egg being healthier or better than any other egg. On every carton of egg, you're gonna see a size listed. Peewee, small, medium, large, extra large, and jumbo. How are these sizes determined? It actually has to do with the weight of a dozen eggs. So a dozen jumbo eggs have to weigh at least 30 ounces when weighed. Jumbo eggs aren't being laid by these freakishly like Frankenstein mega chickens. They're just regular eggs laid by regular chickens. But generally smaller breeds of hens will lay smaller eggs and larger breeds of hens, larger eggs. These eggs would be nutritionally similar, Size doesn't matter. At the store, you'll generally see two different types of eggs. You'll see white eggs and brown eggs. Is there any actual difference nutritionally between these? No. A common misconception is that brown eggs are inherently more natural than white eggs. The misconception comes from the idea that things that are really white are gonna be more industrialized or more refined or more purified. The thing that determines egg color is the breed of the hen that laid the egg. Generally, white hens lay white eggs and brown hens lay brown eggs. Usually on egg cartons, you'll see a sell-by or a best by date. This date cannot be more than 30 days after the eggs were packed. You'll also see a 3-digit number on the package, and this represents the Julian date. A Julian date starts at 1 and goes to 365. January 1st would be 001, December 31st would be 365. And this indicates the day that the eggs were packed. When you buy eggs that are closer to the packing date, that's generally an indicator that you're buying fresher eggs that will last a little bit longer. As eggs age, oxygen enters through the cell and just makes the quality go down. You'll end up with runnier egg whites, less perky egg yolks, and just overall a poor quality egg. But also, the longer eggs sit on the shelf, the more likely it is that pathogens could get inside of these eggs. And the interior of an egg is a great place for a lot of bacteria to grow, including salmonella. As long as eggs are properly stored in the US, meaning refrigeration, the eggs will actually last quite a bit longer than the sell-by date. These packages also state very clearly, keep refrigerated at below 45 degrees Fahrenheit. That's because eggs in the United States are washed. During this washing process, a thin protective layer on the outside of the eggs, called the cuticle, is removed. The cuticle can get stained with either blood or dirt, and can lead to unsightly, unpleasing to look at eggs. But by removing that protective barrier here in the United States, we do increase the ability for bacteria and oxygen to get into the eggs, increasing the rate at which they spoil. Another term that we see here on this package is farm fresh. If these eggs were expired, the package would still say farm fresh. This is entirely meaningless. When it comes to buying eggs, there are a lot of factors that you need to weigh, including budget, how the animals were treated, what the animals were fed. By having more information about these topics, you can make a more informed decision for yourself that matches who you are and your own values.